We are waiting for just a few more pieces to arrive before we begin stepping up the set here in fantasy news, but that will not be the only thing changing from here on out. We are actually going to be restructuring the fantasy news based on the feedback you all gave in the last video I put out, which I want to say genuinely, humbly, thank you all so much for giving such valid, critical feedback. It was so helpful to see how people view the fantasy news, what they do and don't like, and as a result, things will be a tidbit different. We're no longer going to be just starting with the cover reveals, and instead we're going to go ahead and open with just one of the big stories of fantasy news of the week, before transitioning into catching up with any stories that may have been updated from recent weeks. And then finally we'll transition into cover reveals before slipping into things you might be able to spend money on, easily skippable if you just look at the time codes. And then we will jump off into the wider fantasy news after hitting the next big story of the week, if there is one. I know a few people said like the indie pub promo spot, they don't really care about it, cut it. We don't take money for it, we're just genuinely finding books that people in the audience have written and want to promote it for free, just to hopefully give someone a jump start to putting out a book. And so we're going to be keeping that no matter what, because it's just a very near and dear to my heart section of the news. But I understand that not everyone's interested in indie publishing as much as we are, so we'll try and keep them brief. Now with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the fantasy news. Welcome everybody to another episode of Fantasy News. I'm your disheveled goblin host Daniel Green, and today we're going to be going ahead and kicking it off with Penguin Random House, taking a stand in the current fight against or as it's otherwise known, AI. And that is because they apparently are going to be adding some text to their copyright page that reads, "No part of this book may be used or reproduced in any manner for the purpose of training artificial intelligence technologies or systems." And Penguin Random House expressly reserves this work from the text and data mining exception, in line with a law from the European Union. But as the article I'm pulling this from notes, this is kind of more just a warning shot than anything that can be legally enforced. AI is a field that laws will be rapidly evolving around for sure. And Penguin Random House actually is kind of taking a stand here that many publishers are going in the opposite direction of, with some publishers going as far as to actually pin deals to open up their catalogs to such training models. But this is in line with a statement that was released from Penguin House back in August, where they said they are planning to just viciously protect all of their copyrighted materials. And how this will play out, how the laws will evolve, and whether or not this text will have a meaningful difference, I'm not entirely sure. There is a similar practice on some websites where they put in these robot.txt files to say essentially, hey, do not scrape our websites. And they're not exactly legally enforceable, but the good actors in the space tend to obey them, and this could be a similar case for Penguin Random House. It's just an interesting step forward in a conflict that's going to drastically affect our future as content consumers. So I'll be sure to keep you up to date. But speaking of keep you up to date, that's going to take us to our first catch-up story from last week. Last week in Fantasy News, we covered the fact that Han Kang actually received the Nobel Prize in Literature for her work in the science fiction fantasy space. And apparently, Kayla actually has a few of her books, and I'm excited to read material Kayla's actually been recommending to me for a while. I'm forgetful. But that is not the update here, because Han Kang has actually declined press conferences and refused to celebrate winning the Nobel Prize for Literature while people are dying in wars around the world, with her father conveying the message, "With the war intensifying and people being carried out dead every day, how can we have a celebration or a press conference?" She's even apparently gone as far as to dissuade her father from having a celebration for her, and is just trying to make a statement, which I can absolutely respect here, with her father finally saying, "Her perspective has shifted from being a writer living in Korea to a global writer's conscious." And I also want to apologize for calling it a Nobel Peace Prize in Literature last week. That's wrong. It's the Nobel Prize of Literature, not peace. And in the only other piece of catch-up news we have today, the Gollum movie that was apparently going to be split into two films was actually misreported on. Apparently Ian McKellen had it wrong. Damn it! The truth is that apparently there's actually going to be two Lord of the Rings films taking place in this universe adaptation. It's just that one will be a Gollum film, while the other will be something else, unknown at this time. Maybe it's connected to that story, possibly it's not. There could be a case here that they saw the reaction to 2 Gollum movies and went, it's different, and it's gonna just like tangentially, it's fine, it's not a Gollum movie. Who knows what actually is the truth here? But yes, Ian McKellen was wrong when he said it's going to be like Gollum 2, Faster and Furiouser Gollum. But this is going to take us to some of the hardcore fantasy news when it comes to books, starting with the fact that we have gotten the release date in Polish for the next Witcher book. A note in Polish, just super make it clear, the English translation is going to be coming out later. But that confirmed release date is going to be December 1st of this year. And Andrzej Sapkowski is one of the most consistent personalities in the fantasy space. When you cover the news as long as I have, you pick up a little bit on some of these guys' personalities. But when it came to revealing the title, Andrzej said, as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't make a secret of it, but my publisher categorically does not want me to say anything more about it for marketing reasons. So what I can and can't say is prohibited by embargo. This guy just seems frustrated by any industry that's around him ever. And if you look into his history of not controversies, but ups and downs in the space, he basically just wants to be an author, and everything else around him just seems to mildly annoy him, and I respect it after years of watching him. He's consistent. But before we get into the cover reveals of the week, this is going to take us to one of the biggest stories of the week, and that is the fact that the 2024 World Fantasy Convention was recently held in Niagara Falls, very close to me, and I didn't even realize it, and they have announced their winners of their awards for the year, and I will have Kayla go over them now. Kayla, take it away!
And the winner for the best novel is The Reformatory, Tananarive Due. And the winner for the best novella is Half the House is Haunted by Josh Malerman. And the winner for best short fiction is Silk and Cotton and Linen and Blood by Nevo. The best anthology winner is The Book of Witches by Jonathan Strahan. The best collection winner is No One Will Come Back for Us and Other Stories by Primi Mohammed. And the winner of best artist is Audrey Benjaminson. And the winner of the Special Award Professional goes to Liza Groen-Tromby for Locus. And the winner of the Special Award for Non-Professional goes to Lynn M. Thomas and Michael Damian Thomas for Uncanny.
Before we entirely leave the book news space, I just want to say that my book, Better Dead, now at over 90,000 words, because I had just an inspired weekend of writing, and I'm really proud of it. We're going through kind of like a draft 2 of the first 2/3, and it's having fruits. But now, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the beautiful pieces of art that are going to be entering our fantasy and science fiction zeitgeist and being the initial impressions you have, pitches visually, if you will, for stories you may be picking up in the future. Starting with, oh, nope, wait, this one I was about to do didn't credit the artist, so So the first one we're going to be revealing today is actually for a major franchise, and that's going to be for The Hunger Games by Susan Collins, by artist Tim O'Brien. And I gotta say, I know I try to usually find something within the art, how it's conveying the story. Like the initial Hunger Games covers, I feel like did have a lot of personality, depth, and implication within them. These now are just kind of becoming blander versions of that. And I feel like this is surprisingly common with larger IPs as they go on. They, one, I feel like are safer in depending on just, people will recognize it. And two, they always try and capture what the covers that came before that made an impact were, and there's only so many times you can do that before you hit severe diminishing returns. And to me, this cover is a bit uninspired, kind of flat, and just not my taste. But no offense is meant towards Hunger Games as a series or story, and it's actually one I do hope to do an entire read through of the full series one day to get you a review here on the channel. There's just so many books to get to, and I've read the first one and it was pretty good. But that's not the final big franchise cover reveal we got today, because when it comes to special editions, we have gotten an illustrated edition of The Magicians by Lev Grossman coming out from Grim Oak Press, with only 52 lettered editions and 750 of the limited editions total, double signed by the author and Christopher Shy, the artist. And I think this art looks brilliant. It's kind of risky going for like an urban fantasy. Sometimes they can look a little too modern, or sometimes the art just kind of doesn't transport you into a fantastical world. That, for me, in The Magicians, which I've reviewed here, is a must, because it is a modern-ish world that does feel completely foreign at times when you enter the magical aspects of it. It's a little darker than I expected, but I only read the first book. I don't know how dark the sequels get, so this could be tonally perfect. And in terms of representing a darker tone, ooh, doggy. I think this has a lot of personality. And aside from Quentin looking a bit like Timothée Chalamet to me, I have like no critiques. I'm sure for magician collectors out there, this one's gonna end up being a must buy. But hold your horses there. Put on the brakes. It is coming with a $195 price tag for the limited editions and a $500 price tag for the lettered editions. Okay, it does seem that the limited will be cloth bound, but the lettered leather, and a few other smaller different. Okay, these are two different distinct editions of the book, but similar art represented within, and then one's lettered. But I'd like to take a quick break from the news just to talk about Naturally and Smoothly.
Thanking our sponsors with Boblin the Goblin.
I've been taking Grunes for the past 3 weeks now, and I would have been doing it way sooner if I knew just how good they tasted, and with 0 sugar. And they may just taste even better, because for you all, they're going to be 45% off. At least if you use my link in the description down below. This isn't just a multivitamin or a greens gummy or a probiotic. It's all 3 in 1. Grunes are a convenient and comprehensive formula packed into 8 daily gummies. In this space, a lot of times you'll see knockoff brands of knockoff brands that try to offer like 400% of the amount of daily intake you need. But that's what's important about Grunes. Grunes contains 100% of your daily needs for safe vitamins and 25% of your daily needs that are known to be potentially toxic at excessive levels over an extended period of exposure, as well as 60 plus whole food ingredients. And you don't need to mix these with water or eat them with a full meal, and instead they can be absolutely eaten at your convenience. Again, you can get 45% off if you just use the link in the description right down there. Back to the news. But if you're looking for some non-major franchise art to be sold a book on, well, this next art from Kelly Chong just might do it for Tideborn. Coming out March of 2025, a dragon queen, a vengeful sea witch, and a mythical titan converge on the underwater city of Taikawi in this sequel to the international best-selling epic fantasy Fathom Folk. And I remember covering, I believe, the first cover in this series, and the second is delivering just as much. Obviously, like, initial shock on that color pop is wow, but the amount of detail you're getting in this stylized way, including leviathans, what looks to be some kind of mythical creatures, and a bit of culture down below, layered in with these underwater sea reef vibes, it's like it's painting the world before you, and this is the kind of art, like, people like to say, don't judge a book by its art, but like, the art is there to help assist you, to help get you the point if it's done right, and this is succeeding without question. And I know we've had Kelly Chong's name come up here before for cover reveals, and they're usually of this caliber, so fantastic job. I mean, they got little people playing instruments. Whimsical. And then finally, before we end the money segment, we have one last classic being redone and put out in a special edition for you all, and it's one of the most influential vampire books of all time, Carmilla. Well on its way to being funded in the first days of the campaign, this special edition of Carmilla, one of the earliest vampire tales in the genre and an example of early queer romance, is going to be getting an illustrated hardback edition with this stylized art in a slipcover case, and oh my god! If you're a vampire fan, if you're a queer romance fan, I don't normally plug Kickstarters this hard, but I'm actually backing this one. Not paid to say that. I always let you know if I'm paid to cover a Kickstarter. They're always just from Wraithmarked. I'm not paid to cover this one. I'm backing this one. Damn, dude. Although I'm just going for the standard edition. Sorry, I don't believe in lettered and numbered. I don't. I know I've done them, but like other people like them. I'll fill that market void, but like I personally don't collect them. But believe it or not, somehow that is not even the biggest piece of vampire news we are getting this week, because the man many people would consider the father of modern conceptions around vampires is releasing a new book. That is right, we're getting new Bram Stoker before Winds of Winter. I said the thing. The meme. The Irish author of Dracula has actually had a story that was initially published 130 years ago, rediscovered after it was lost, and now will be put out and made available to the public once again. Titled Giblet Hill, the short story was initially printed in the 1890 Christmas supplement of the Dublin Daily Express, but was lost after its first printing, and remained oddly largely undocumented, only occasionally seen in some relevant texts of the time talking about works that Bram Stoker had put out with no surviving copies. Brian Cleary, a Bram Stoker expert, managed to find a copy, saying, "I was sitting there in this beautiful room at the National Library on October 12, 2023, holding my breath while I gazed at what I had just found and thinking, am I the only person alive who has read this story?" That's right, he was just browsing the National Library of Ireland, going through archives, and he found a copy of this script that was just lost amongst the shuffle. It's a dark story of a man traveling through the English countryside who comes across a haunting story involving murders, hangings, and demonic and malevolent children. And apparently there was a plan to publish this back in Stoker's day in one of the volumes of short stories he was going to put out, but he passed before he managed to get to it. And maybe most interestingly to me in this entire article was when Bram Stoker managed to write this story, because apparently it was while he was working on Dracula, at his literary most important time for his career when it came to what he was putting out and working on. Holy crap. They're planning on publishing the story, and all the proceeds will be going to charity, and the Stoker Festival within Ireland is going to be having a public reading of it taking place. Just an absolutely incredible find, discovery, and moment in the world of literature. Holy shit. And then bookending the story with the final meme, we got new Bram Stoker before we got GTA 6. Now no comments need to make those two done, tired jokes. We're good. From here, though, we're going to be covering news that could be impacting how you read the very books you love, and that is because Amazon has officially released the pre-orders for its new full-color Kindle. And it's being touted as a game changer in the space, despite Kobo having a color option available that also has library hook-ins, and that way you don't have to buy into the Amazon ecosystem. Am I covering this story just to promote a competitor to Amazon? Not entirely. Let's get into it. Releasing October 30th with a price tag of $280, the Kindle Color Soft Signature Edition will ship with 32 gigabytes of storage. And my own personal preference for Kobo aside, not just because they helped us with a charity project here on the channel, I do genuinely use my Kobo a lot for reading and have come to like it more over time. I will say, if you are someone who is devoted to the Amazon system and is wondering if whether or not upgrading to a color will be worth it, if you have a lot of spare money and you read graphic novels and comics, absolutely. But if you're someone who is just trying to get through reading day to day, I still have not really been sold on a reason why to upgrade from just the standard Kindle, unless you are devoutly taking notes and need that stronger software, highlight capabilities. I think for 90% of e-reader users, they're kind of depending on FOMO of like, oh, maybe I do need this tech upgrade, like the iPhone 16. You don't, and you should be fine with, I have a Kindle still in my drawer that I got I think 8-9 years ago, and it works just well for reading. But if you love comics, if you really like seeing color covers or maybe some interior illustrations and art, then absolutely, this could be an upgrade you would want, and is competition within the e-reader space continuing to push innovation from larger and smaller players in both directions. And that's all great. But from here, we're going to transition into the wider fantasy news and look at everything from movies to video games, starting with the latter, because we had an attention-getting headline drop where a former PlayStation boss has said he is seeing a collapse in creativity as publishers spend more time asking, what's your monetization scheme? Going on to importantly clarify that, of course, there is a vibrant indie community that's basically keeping the industry afloat right now, but on the AAA level with these gargantuan budgets involved with games, citing the $200 million budget for Horizon's Forbidden West, the questions become, how can we make more money off this? What's the scheme? Rather than just, is it fun? Which I believe actually hits on a point we made in the recent Game of Thrones Will There Be a Next One video here on the channel. Having too big of a budget, too many resources can become choking and antithetical to creativity, whereas your bottom line is so high, any form of creative danger is far less likely to happen. And instead what you end up with something boiled down and safe. That's not a universal truth. Of course, there are exceptions to it, but it's interesting to see a similar pattern affecting the video game industry as well. But speaking of video games, one of the ones I am most excited for to actually come out, to both fill me with wonder and terror, because this game has scared the shit out of me before with sudden sea creatures, we have gotten the trailer for Subnauitica 2, and it looked absolutely wonderful. That being said, Subnautica 1 is not really aged at all poorly. I still can jump in it. I think I did a couple months ago, but what they're going to be able to do from that rock solid foundation, I can't wait to see, and do hope that this has a upgrade in a substantial way where I'm able to talk long enough for you to see enough of the trailer for it to be worth me covering. Yay! I did really want to cover this though, because Subnautica 2, dope. Although to be fair, because I've done this to like every other video game trailer that doesn't show a lot of gameplay footage, there's not a lot of real gameplay footage, and this is more just like a get hyped trailer. But speaking of industry problems within video games, Squadron 42 is making headlines again. Yes, the single-player addition to Star Citizen, the game that totally is going to come out someday after ballooning a budget of over $700 million and being in development for over a decade. There was even a live showcasing of this game that looked incredible before it crashed in the live demo. Well, also we're getting headlines that apparently the studio itself is running thin on money and people are complaining about micromanagement. With Chris Roberts in 2022 having mass layoffs and demanding workers come to the UK, what is actually happening over at Star Citizen is anyone's guess at this point, but if the money does finally start drying up, the people who invest so much in it stop being Charlie Brown, that might actually get them to put out this game in some playable way. But to be fair, I've been Charlie Browned by it before as well. The last time they did a big Squadron release and were like, oh, it's coming out, I was like, yeah, nice. It's easy to get excited about this again when they've given a 2026 release date and said it's feature complete. I don't actually believe that. And also, that's kind of within the 2 to 3 year window that things are typically off with Star Citizen related things. That being said, yeah, the cast is still incredible with the faces of like Gary Oldman and Henry Cavill in there. It's nuts. I hope one day we get this game. I'm gonna keep being the Charlie Brown. I'm gonna get my hopes up. I just don't believe it this time. That being said though, I will admit, if you remove the crashes, if you remove the history from the game, the demo looked badass. I'm going to give them that. It looked cool. I feel like I've done a bit of a poor job fully explaining this situation. Star Citizen is a game, as I said, that's been being worked on for 12 years and has raised over $700 million, while consistently along the way promising things, most of which have yet to come to fruition. Squadron 42 is this game within the game that was supposed to have come out soon about a year ago when I personally got Charlie Browned by it, that has still not been released. They're putting out bigger and better previews, but that's what they've been doing for this long. If you're still a fan who's getting hyped for it, cool. But me personally, I will not trust this business or how they do business until there is actually a functioning game out to buy. That's where I draw the line at this point. Fool me 400 times and I'm done. But this is going to take us to the trailer news for the week, starting with Ash. Starring Eliza Gonzalez and Aaron Paul, on the mysterious planet of Ash, Rhea awakens to find her crew slaughtered when a man named Brion arrives to rescue her. An ordeal of psychological and physical terror ensues, while Rhea and Brion must decide if they can trust one another to survive. Coming to theaters in 2025. And it looked interesting from the visuals. This could either be the kind of thing that like succeeds in being visually distinct, or after 30 minutes of watching it kind of just becomes like color smears. but I'm always down for a pulled back narrative psychological survival horror story in the science fiction or fantasy genres. So I'm inclined to like this kind of thing, and most likely will be tuning in. I'm also a sucker for Aaron Paul. How has he not had a bigger career after Breaking Bad? That drives me nuts. I really like him. But getting into some quicker news, we have also had another trailer drop for Dune Prophecy, the HBO Max limited series, and The Electric State, with Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt attached, as well as the Russo brothers. And I'm going to actually slow down the quickie news here to say, this looks like the most overblown. I don't have faith. The trailer did not win me over, and it just looks like a massively overproduced, you'll watch it 'cause names movie, and that's kind of one of my least favorite genres Hollywood tends to put out. I hope, sincerely, I'm proven wrong.
You can't change the way things are. Watch me.
Very subtle.
But described as set in the aftermath of a robot uprising in an alternate version of the 90s, The Electric State follows an orphaned teenager who ventures across the American West with a cartoonish-inspired robot, a smuggler, and his sidekick in search of her younger brother. And to all of that, I say, neat. For this next story, though, Goblins, I need you to be calm, keep it cool, and sheathe your blades. Have a little bit of faith here. Now, gut reaction, let's look at the headline. I know you're going to be a little bit upset. Luca Guadagnino to direct new American Psycho movie at Lionsgate with Scott Z. Burns set to adapt. Hold up. I know American Psycho is a beloved film with one of the greatest horror performances from Christian Bale of all time within it. And yes, it changed quite a bit from the book, but is also revered as an adaptation. But the conversation around adaptation right now and expectations is polluted from Hollywood creating adaptations that do not need to exist or lack a new creative vision coming into adapting a material. But just because something has been adapted once does not mean it should never be adapted again by a new creative vision. And I think this may be one of the cases where a genuine visionary is coming in, being inspired by a source material, and wanting to do something different with it. And at least it will be better than American Psycho 2.
I was only 12 years old and I wasn't gonna let Patrick Bateman ruin my life.
Now, I say that because Luca Guadagnino is in current talks to adapt the high-profile book to the screen. Guadagnino is the exact kind of visionary I would actually be interested in seeing readapt this material. With stories under his belt like I Am Love, Suspiria, Bones and All, The Bigger Splash, Call Me By Your Name, the Oscar winner is stepping up to take a new vision on a story that has not been adapted in decades. This is not smelling of a cash grab to me. And even Burns, the filmmaker who has been working with him recently on this project, is someone who's had mixed reception in his career, but personally, I've been more on the positive side for the guy's catalog. And look, we can just all agree, it's definitely going to be better than American Psycho 2.
And sexier than ever before.
Ribbed for her pleasure.
And awesome news for Mike Flanagan fans. It turns out he is going to be doing another adaptation of Carrie.
As a miniseries for Amazon Prime.
Which, there's been a lot of adaptations of Carrie. I like Mike Flanagan. I love that he's doing Dark Tower. I think he actually managed to do a somewhat decent sequel to The Shining if you watch the director's cut. And pretty much everything else he's touched involving Stephen King and horror has at least been solid to great. Another Carrie, if you don't know, there's been a few and sequels. Seems like a lot, but I do have faith because Mike Flanagan. I know this is kind of conflicting to what I just said about another, but like, hey, it's just my honest thoughts. And I don't know. I've just seen the Carrie story many times. But we're going to be closing out this episode of Fantasy News with a massive shout out to a much more massive than me creator on the platform here, Markiplier. I've never sat down and watched his stuff a whole lot, but he's been a good representative of the platform, and he's continuing that legacy, it seems, because his series, Edge of Sleep, is now available on streaming. Dropped on Prime, it has garnered immediately a strong response from fans, described as when a nightmare watchman finishes his shift at work, he is terrified to discover that everyone in the world who went to sleep the previous night has died. Now, he and a band of survivors must stay awake and uncover the secret of this global epidemic before they fall asleep. Ever since Nightmare on Elm Street, I've liked trying to stay awake as a narrative device a wonderful source of tension. And the trailers for this, I watched a little bit of the first episode. It's high quality stuff. I know people tend to react like, oh, YouTubers fans always hype their products. I've found that in recent years that not to be the case necessarily, especially if something's a real stinker. But even people who seem to be outside of Markiplier's audience have a strong positive reaction to this. So I do plan on watching Edge of Sleep, and let me know if you'd like to see a review here on the channel as well.
And today's Indie Pub promo is The Huntsman's War by Bennett Barclay. Pitched as a dark, heroic fantasy about duty, the nature of heroism, and the questions about where loyalty truly belongs. With cover art by Felix Ortiz and cover layout by Emily Hummer. Gregan Hadshaw has not been a soldier for a very long time. He is a monster hunter, a huntsman in the service to Astropor, the living god of light. War has returned to his land, but he wants no part of it. This is not his war. Not anymore. The war had other plans. When Astropor's holy city is sacked by the enemy, Gregan finds himself pulled into the middle of a war he was never supposed to be a part of. And when his divine master asks for his help, Gregan is forced to make a choice. Either he must obey the word of his god, or take the path that his conscience knows is right. The choice Gregan makes will change the war, his nation, and Gregan himself forever. Check it out in the links down below.
And thank you, everyone who has made this recent fantasy news change possible. I really appreciate the critical feedback once again. And thank you also, everyone who made the recent merch drop our most successful ever. Cannot tell you how much we appreciate y'all. And like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And if you'd like to submit a story covered here in next week's fantasy news, all you gotta do is join the Discord server, go to the fantasy news channel, and drop whatever links you want to see there. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.